The thing that people do with me, which I find quite interesting, they think I'm actually like how I am on stage, and that I do just want to get hold of a shotgun and go blasting men. I know I express extreme ideas, but certainly there's nothing better than a massive room full of like men and women laughing together. It reminds me of the 1980s where there was something called political correctness. I think to some extent it's similar to that in a way, that there's a kind of group of people that have decided on a code, but they haven't checked with everyone else. And so first of all, you don't know what the code is. And secondly, if you break the code, you don't know until someone's told you that knows what the code is. And I think it makes things very difficult.
You have found the Thinking Mind podcast.
Welcome back to the Thinking Mind podcast. Today, Rebecca and I are in conversation with British comedy legend, writer, presenter and actress Jo Brand. You know her from shows like Through the Cake Hole, Getting On, QI, Would I Lie to You, and The Bake Off. But of course, she was also a psychiatric nurse at the South London and Maudsley Trust for 10 years. In today's episode, we discuss comedy, Jo's first time on stage, political correctness, wokeism, dysfunctional relationship patterns, the dilemmas that modern women face, Jo's experiences working in a psychiatric emergency clinic, misconceptions about mental health, and many other topics. This is the Thinking Mind podcast, the podcast all about psychology, psychiatry, psychotherapy, and self-development. If you like the podcast, there are many ways you can support it. You can follow on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen, give us a rating, share with a friend. Or if you want to support us further, you can check out the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description. Thanks for listening, and now here's today's episode with Jo Brand. Jo Brand, thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
Pleasure, thanks so much.
You're the first comedian we've had on the podcast, so welcome. Something I've always been curious about, I've always wanted to ask a stand-up this is, when was the first time you became aware of humor, of being funny, of making jokes? Do you remember?
Well, I suppose it was at a very young age, because I'm the middle child. I had two brothers. And they were like terrible practical jokers, and they teased me as well. They both zoned in on me. And so I suppose times when I kind of inadvertently got my own back on them were great. And my favourite was, I don't know how old I was, like 6 or something. We lived in the middle of nowhere in Kent, and we were playing in the woods, and one of my brothers trod in a wasp's nest, and they all came out like really angrily, and I ran one way and my brothers ran the other way, and they chased my brothers and stung them really badly. I know that's terrible to be pleased, but it was like, it felt like a little comedy victory for me, I suppose.
Yeah, I guess growing up around brothers, it must have been like a tough environment, and you have to figure out how you're going to hold your own in that kind of space.
Yeah, because they grew up to be lovely guys, and but they were just so horrible when they were young, and when they joined forces, they were, 4 times as bad. So you do learn strategies, yeah. Also, my mum was as tough as old boots, so, that helped.
And you were quite rebellious when you were younger, is that right?
No, I was a nun. Yeah. It's hard to say how it happened, but we kind of, my parents didn't get on well when we went into our teenage years, and they were sort of heading for divorce. And my mum left quite a lot of times because my dad was really hard work, to put it mildly. He suffered from depression, and he had a terrible temper, and we kind of walked on eggshells around him for a long time. And so when you're a teenager, and particularly when you're a girl, he was kind of quite traditional. He wanted me to be ridiculously demure, and I didn't want to be. So we always had clashes, and And then when kind of boyfriends came on the scene, it was even worse. And I think it got to a stage where, I mean, he's actually knocked out one of my boyfriends one night because...
How did that happen?
Well, he was extremely posh, this guy, and came from a very wealthy family. I don't know how I managed that, but because I was just some oik, you know. And my dad was a dyed-in-the-wool socialist, you know, as you pretty
are.
much, yeah. So he brought me home late, and my dad, he was such a cliche sometimes. He kind of did that, what do you mean by bringing my daughter home at this time? And this guy said to him, because he's like privately educated, he went, my dear chap, like that.
That's right? The worst thing you could say in that situation. The worst thing you could say. And my dad said, if you say something like that again, he did tell him, I'm going to hit you. And he said it again. I've no idea why. I think he must have thought my dad was joking or something. And he went, but my dear chap. And my dad lamped him. He must have thought, my dear chap always works well at the gentleman's club. So.
Well, indeed. Sadly, we weren't the gentleman's club. So I think, but at that point, we all realised, I know my mum wanted to leave, and I think they just had enough of me, because I used to get out of my bedroom window at night and go clubbing and all that sort of thing. And I got in through the garage window one night, fell on my dad's car and dented it. You know, it was a typical hideous teenage shenanigans, really.
And at that time, how much insight do you have about that? Do you I'm curious even about dating and choosing relationships, because there's that stereotype that you might choose the boy that's going to piss off your parents the most.
Yeah.
Do you think any of that was playing a role?
I didn't identify him in a lineup, but, you know, I think I was very much drawn to someone that was rebellious. I mean, he was quite rebellious as far as his family were concerned as well. Because I think one thing that happens with very wealthy families is that their children end up rebelling against their sort of status quo. So he didn't really work very hard, and he lay about, and actually he used drugs. So, you know, his family were like really, really pissed off with him as well.
Yeah, wealth is a curious one, because, I mean, classically we think of wealth as a good thing. When it comes to raising kids, wealth can be tricky, because if you grow up in a wealthy family, you're very insulated from the ups and downs of reality, which most people have to face when they're young, and which I think is very healthy for your psychological development, to face difficulty. Have you watched that TV show, White Lotus?
No, people keep telling me to, and I haven't.
So yeah, White Lotus is one of the cool things about that show, is it illustrates how when you're very wealthy, it insulates you from reality, and it deadens you a bit inside, because like human beings are made to encounter challenges, and that's what shapes us, I think, in a lot of ways. So how old were you when you left the family home then?
I was sort of very late 16, just 17, I think. Yeah. I moved in with this guy into a scuzzy bedsit, like you do. And rather weirdly, my parents, with some negotiation with the school, because I was doing my A-levels, they managed to get the school to agree for me to go back one day a week to do my A-levels. And I got a job in the civil service. And my job was the Department of the Environment, and my job was to pay cleaners every week and organise their tax and all that sort of thing. But what I remember really well about that job was I sat next to a woman in the office, and opposite her was her husband, and they'd been working together there for 17 years. And I remember thinking, I never want to do anything like that. I mean, they're very sweet and all that, but I just sort of found that just looking at it from outside just seemed stifling.
There's something about that day-to-day office life, the 9 to 5, and there's that humdrum of office life. That's quite nightmarish.
It was nightmarish. And again, this wasn't deliberate, but it was someone's birthday, and we all went for a drink in the sort of clubhouse at lunchtime. And I didn't have a lot to drink, and I don't think I was really drunk, but I fell asleep on my desk and dribbled all over it, and I got caught by my manager. And I was kind of rather sweetly asked to leave rather than get sacked.
And you're still a teenager at this point?
Yeah.
And then how did you get into psychiatric nursing? Because, of course, you were a psychiatric nurse for 10 years.
That's right. Because, what happened was I kind of reconciled like a bit with my parents, and they split up and got back together a lot. And I moved back in with them for a bit after I split up with this guy. Basically, what happened with him was he worked up in London during the week, and then I used to meet him at weekends on Friday nights. And after about, not very long, 5 or 6 months maybe, I went to meet him at the pub. This was in Hastings in Sussex, and I got there half an hour early, and he was kissing someone else in the corner. What a bastard! And I'd thrown up my whole
your whole
everything.
existence.
Yeah,
for him.
exactly, for him. So I think that taught me an early lesson. Yeah.
So then you reconciled with your parents on some level.
I moved to Tunbridge Wells because I went to school there and I had some friends there. And so while he was at work one day, I just stripped the entire place in quite a sort of, a bit of retribution and revenge in a way. So that when he came home, he would open the door and there'd be nothing there.
And his stuff, was it more stealing it, burning it, or?
No, I put it somewhere where he could get it. I gave his stuff to someone. So I didn't absolutely.
So you're going for like the shock value of walking into your apartment.
I like the idea of him opening the door and there being an empty room.
That's amazing.
I know, I'm not very nice, really. But I think hell hath no fury. There is some truth in that,
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially when you've totally overcommitted yourself.
And isn't that the way that we find people that we think, the people who we think we should give up everything for are precisely the people that we shouldn't give up anything for?
You're so right. But you could write a book about that because people do that sort of thing all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you ever, I'm sure you don't because you're the wrong type of customer, but I look at Mumsnet quite a lot because it's not what people think it is. It's not like, have you got a good recipe for a Victoria sponge? It's kind of divided into sections, and there's one section called relationships. And it's so sad, really. The poor women in these pointless, abusive relationships with really horrible men when they describe what they do. And, I think that there is something about women. I don't know what it is, whether it's their history and their sort of abusive father maybe, or whatever it is, that they end up repeating the same pattern. It's depressing, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think repetition is a feature of everyone's life. And then the question is, do you have healthier or unhealthier repetitions? Have you ever heard of the narcissist codependent dynamic?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, that's the idea that we're talking about, that there are people who their psychological pattern is to kind of disown their agency and their power and to look for it in other people. And then there are people who really overemphasize their agency and power and how much worth they have, and they're narcissists, and they kind of lock together in this toxic pattern.
Yes. Oh dear. Hideous, isn't it?
But it sounds like you've got out of it. You're in a long marriage.
Yeah, I've been married since... I should remember, shouldn't I? Of course I know. 1997.
And how do you feel like that's taught you lessons about what could make a successful relationship?
Well, I think my motto for a lot of my life has been lower your expectations. And certainly I think as far as relationships are concerned, I kind of knew a lot of women when I was younger who would just say things like, I really want to get married. And I'd say, well, what does that mean? What do you mean? What sort of person do you want to get married to? Where do you want to be? How do you want it to be? And people would just see that. I think it's quite different now, actually, in a way, but they would just see that as a goal. And men, men weren't going around going, I really want to get married. They were going, I hope someone, I'm not including them all in this, but certainly the dynamic was very different.
No, absolutely. I mean, men have a similar but different problem. Men are like, I want to sleep with someone.
Yeah.
But they don't think, who do I want to sleep with?
No, absolutely. It's so interesting, isn't it? And I think like women try and pretend that's not the case when they know it is, and then you know they're kind of really hurt when they have a one night stand and someone's not interested afterwards. I feel like I want to go round with like young women and go, this might happen. Just be prepared.
There's an idea in our culture that women should date more in a male style, that sort of a more of a loose attitude to sex is sort of a indicator of female empowerment. And of course, women being able to make whatever choices they want is a good thing. But I wonder if there's a dark side to that women end up falling into these traps like you outlined, that, you know, people do become attached after they have sex, and they can fall into despondency if they're having a lot of partners very quickly.
Absolutely. Is that a man's idea that women should do that?
Yeah. Yeah.
I was going to say.
There's your answer then, in a way. I think women need to look into themselves a bit, realise what a lot of them are like, and act accordingly, you know, because I think there is a pressure. Well, I think like dating these days is so interesting because you have things these days called situationships, friends with benefits, you know. And I feel like that's always been the case. We just didn't give it a name, and we didn't try and sort of, you know, legalise it, if you like, and say that's all right to have that. Because I think it's something that's been sort of manipulated to make women believe that's okay. But a lot of women, because my daughters are 22 and 20, and so you know, I hear what's going on with that generation and try and learn the words and all that. But you know, that a lot of women aren't happy with that. Really, they've kind of been forced to believe they should be like that, so they sort of tolerate it, really.
And it's just the pendulum just swung from one point to another.
Absolutely.
And you can liberate people to make their own choices, while at the same time telling people, you know, you have a nature, and that nature means you have certain predispositions and desires and aversions. And of course, we've been generalizing a bit, because a lot of men want loving relationships. A lot of women want to be able to enjoy sex.
I feel I've been a bit unfair on them so far.
That's all right.
I'll pull myself up.
But I think we're still struggling as a society to figure out how can we give people choices without putting people into boxes.
Yes, absolutely. Well, one big issue for me is how black and white everything is. You know, I mean, if you look in the like the tabloids, for example, you know, that's bad, that's good. There's nothing in between, and there's no nuance at all. I mean, obviously, my comedy, I know I'm not famous for nuance, but that's my comedy. You know, it's meant to make people laugh. It's not meant to be a political discussion about what I think about an aspect of society. But I do feel that's why so many discussions about everything are just stopped in their tracks, because people take such extreme opposing views, and neither of them will move inwards. It's really hard, I think.
Absolutely. And I guess in comedy, you almost want to move to a black and white position because you're trying to disrupt a pattern. So let's say people think a certain way about relationships, and then you construct a joke about relationships. If that joke is too nuanced, it doesn't disrupt people's normal thinking. We come in with like a sledgehammer with something black and white.
Absolutely.
Breaks things apart.
And I was kind of very aware of that when I started, because on the comedy circuit at the time, there were probably about 15 women and about 250 men. And so it was very rare to ever be on a bill with another woman. It just never happened, you know. And I think sort of you have a kind of, you know, a sort of level of confidence. And in terms of comedy, women's confidence was very low and men's was very high because they'd always ruled the roost and they'd been doing it for donkey's years, you know. And so I don't remember thinking this consciously, but I know I kind of went in and I thought, I'm just going to be really shocking and see what happens.
Yeah. I think I don't think there's anything braver than stand up, really. I think, you know, there's things which are
being a firefighter, being a climbing Everest.
Physically braver,
Okay.
but in terms of your social reputation and like psychologically, it doesn't get.
Well, yes, I suppose so. Yeah, but you know, a lot of people say to me, I couldn't do what you do, but I think that people could if you gave them the tools.
Absolutely,
you know?
yeah.
A handful of heckle put downs ranging from quite pleasant to nuclear.
Yeah.
And if you have to use nuclear first, then you're in trouble. You know, and people take things so personally as well. You know, I always say to like sort of younger comics, you know, if someone's heckling you and saying something really nasty, it doesn't mean they mean that about you. It means they've just had a fight with someone or they've been sacked or, you know, it could be 100 different reasons. But some people just take on that whole pain, which unfortunately social media has allowed to be multiplied a millionfold, you know.
Yeah, I mean, people, even when they're discussing their ideas and opinions, they think my opinion about politics is a part of me. And therefore, if you disagree with my opinion about politics or whatever the issue is, you're attacking me on some basic level.
Absolutely.
We don't have that basic training of you need to be a little bit detached from your ego, from your ideas, even your performance in something. Let's say you're learning to play an instrument or you're learning stand-up or you're learning about podcasting. You need to dissociate yourself a bit from your skill level and your performance.
No, absolutely. I always thought, you know, school doesn't really teach you what you need to know in some ways, does it? Academically, yes, it may well do. You know, but in terms of relationships and the more subtle kind of shades of how you deal with certain things, I think that would be so useful at school.
And how to manage your emotions.
Yeah, absolutely. Because a lot of people can't, can they? I mean, you know, I'm not excluding myself from that. Occasionally I can't either. But, you know, it's very useful to have some tools to do that, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we're psychiatrists and a huge amount of my job, I was saying this on a podcast that came out this morning, a huge amount of my job I felt I had to learn separately outside of the curriculum through my own reading, largely reading psychology books and things like that. So either we start teaching this in schools or we start having a very direct conversation with young people that's like, you're not going to learn everything you need to know from school. You need to do your own research.
Yeah, I mean, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Because do you think that what the sort of personality a psychiatrist is and how they behave is an important component of their job?
Can you explain the question a bit more?
Okay, well, it particularly pertains to one thing, which is that I'm talking about clinical psychologists, actually. But when I was a senior charge nurse in the emergency clinic, and we'd it was before that. But I was at Brunel University, and a friend of mine became a clinical psychologist. But I remember her telling me that the Maudsley doesn't interview clinical psychologists, it just creams off the ones with the highest exam marks. And to be honest, I thought that was a terrible thing to do, because I think you don't know who you're getting, do you? You don't know how sensitive they are. You don't know. I mean, not that you can tell whether someone's sort of likely to be abusive or unkind or whatever, but I think an interview gives you a bit of an idea of what social skills somebody has. And if you're a psychologist, to me, it's important that you have the basic minimum skills rather than just being extremely intelligent.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess the problem with the selection process you outlined, we just pick the people with the best results, is you're only selecting for intelligence. All intelligence is the ability to make like abstractions and to manipulate those abstractions and to solve problems. And intelligence isn't the same thing as wisdom. And it, like you say, it doesn't say anything about your personality. There are a lot of very intelligent doctors who lack people skills. And you need to have people skills in any specialty, psychiatry especially, I would say. But I remember my first job, which was 10 years ago, and I was working on a surgical ward. The surgeons were different in terms of how good they were at surgery, and we all knew who were the best ones and the worst ones. But the best surgeon was really good at surgery and really good at talking to people as well.
That's the perfect combination, isn't it?
Yeah. I think for psychiatry, you need to be really good at thinking about things differently, exploring new ideas, and you need to be very empathic, I think. What do you think, Rebecca?
To answer your question, I would say in psychiatry it's the same with all walks of life, in that you'll have very good psychiatrists and you'll probably end up having very bad psychiatrists. I think absolutely you need the skills of empathy and compassion. I think you need the ability to want to learn from other people, because we've all grown up individually and see the world in an individual way. And you will have your own thoughts. But actually, I think it's a skill to learn from other people so that you can incorporate other people's views in your practice. Because every patient is different, regardless of what area of psychiatry you go into. I think that's a very important skill. And also I think, time and just practice, and because we all learn every day so much. Yeah. So I suppose the other thing is to be humble with yourself, so that you always learn.
That's a quality missing in surgery quite a lot of the time, isn't it?
We're always quite mean to surgeons on the podcast, and the honest answer is that I don't know many surgeons, so I don't really know what to say. Yeah,
I think they've got a reputation. I mean, certainly I used to share a flat with two anaesthetists from King's, actually, and the sort of legend about surgeons was they couldn't wait to get off for the weekend and sail their yacht round.
I don't think that's the case anymore.
Has that changed?
I don't think we can afford yachts anymore.
I don't think.
Well, absolutely. Of course, there is. Yeah, that's changed a lot, hasn't it?
Mm. Do you remember the first time you ever went on stage?
Ish. Mainly because I was quite drunk.
Yeah.
Because I was compensated. Like I was very really anxious, because I'd never done anything like that before. I'd left university and I didn't really know how you wrote a stand-up set, because these days there's endless kind of workshops and, podcasts and all that stuff. Nothing in my day. And I didn't even know how to become a comic, really. I thought you had to go to drama school.
Right.
So I wrongly auditioned for drama school. Totally humiliated. So in the end, I just the 80s happened and there started being like open mics in alternative comedy clubs. So I decided I would do a benefit, because a friend of mine was setting up a benefit with comedians. She said, just come and do 5 minutes. So first of all, I was on last, which is a really bad place to put a new act, but she didn't realise that she should be building to someone more experienced. So it was midnight. I probably had about 5 pints of lager and I can't really hold my drink at all. And I'd written a really inappropriate, slightly over academic set about Freud's work.
Amazing. Were you a nurse already at this time?
Yeah, this was because when I did nursing and I did a degree at the same time, there was a joint mental health nursing and a degree course at Brunel University. So yeah.
And do you remember any of the jokes from that set?
Oh my God, no. I've probably written it down somewhere. No, I've actually wiped the content of that night from my head because it was awful in every way you could imagine. And actually what happened was there were two male stand-ups at the back who were notorious for doing sort of like they had a kind of rather arty sort of approach to their act. So their act consisted of things like lying on broken glass. It was like art kind of students
a bit
in the
pretentious.
19s. Yeah, a little bit. But they were very drunk as well. And they just, can I swear on this?
Yeah.
They just started chanting, "Fuck off, you fat cow," over and over and over again. And in the end, I just thought, yeah, better fuck off. So I did. So I probably lasted, I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes.
You should have been thinking, wait 20 years, I'm going to be baking on TV.
Well, yeah. I mean, and oh God, it was, and actually I was insulated against it quite a lot because I was very drunk, because a lot of it just...
So presumably getting on stage the second time, what did that take? Was that difficult, having had a bad experience the first time?
Well, I think what was right about the second time was because that was a benefit that was sort of set up in a rather inappropriate venue in the West End. And the people that had come to see it weren't normal, natural comedy fans. The second one was actually at a proper comedy club. So you do kind of need the rules to tell the audience how to how to behave rather. So they knew that they were supposed to be a comedy audience and they were supposed to either laugh or not laugh. So those parameters in place were helpful. So it did go a bit better. I remember my first joke ever I did at that, which was, I thought was hilarious, but it wasn't, according to them. But basically what I did was I had a big white T-shirt on, a really baggy plain white T-shirt. And when the compere started building up to announcing me, I put a blood capsule in my mouth. And I went on stage and I coughed like that. And it all went down my T-shirt. And I went, oh, I must give up smoking. And I thought that was hilarious. Not a peep. Just, it was a bit too much for them, I think, But I persevered with it 6 or 7 more times. And I just, I don't know, ahead of my time, behind my time, whatever I was, it never really worked.
And so at what point do you start thinking, I'm going to make a career out of this? Was it very gradual, or was it just like from the start?
No, I think it came in sort of like reveals almost, So at one point, someone was at, I think probably the 3rd or 4th gig that I did, they were starting to go kind of a bit better. And they actually offered me a proper comedy booking at a theatre in Notting Hill. And so I was like, oh, I'm on the road to success now. That didn't go terribly well, but I mean, it was a proper booking. And then the other thing I did, because I kind of was aware of the circuit, so I sort of slightly played a game, whereas a lot of people were phoning up the Comedy Store, which was the big, massive venue at the time, saying, oh, please, can I come and work there? I just sort of studiously looked in the other direction, and they eventually called me and said, would you like to come and work here? And that to me was like a really big thing.
Yeah. So you you use an indirect route.
Yeah, I didn't kind of clamour. And then also I was asked, this is after 2 years, to audition for a show called Friday Night Live, which is a live stand-up show. And also the fact that they'd asked me to audition kind of gave me hope, because it meant, well, they must think I'm at least good enough to consider. So I got through that audition and did Friday Night Live. I was still working in the emergency clinic when I did the audition. And then when they offered me a slot on TV, I resigned, because I thought, I cannot bear to go on TV and everyone at the Maudsley kind of...
knowing about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
What was it like working in the emergency clinic?
I absolutely loved it. To me, what's important about a place like the emergency clinic is that you can absolutely 100% rely on the people that you work with. And so for the first...
And this was a psychiatric emergency clinic.
Yeah, it was. And the setup was, I mean, I just think it's so... I know they closed it down because of money, really, because it was expensive to run. It was 24 hours, and absolutely anyone that wanted to could walk through the door and be assessed. Also, we covered the whole of South London for police section 136s as well. So we would take people from the whole area. So that was quite a common thing. And, it isn't that very often, but occasionally if someone would fly over from Italy and get off a plane and come straight here because they'd heard about it.
That happens still.
Yeah.
Still happens.
Does it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? So really it was a totally unpredictable place to be. And I kind of like that about it, really. And I was a staff nurse there for, when did I start? So I was there for 6 years, and I was a staff nurse for about 4 years, and then I was a charge nurse and then the senior charge nurse. So once I kind of got my hands into them, I could sort of influence the staff that we had. So that was helpful.
And presumably you're seeing people with relapses, say, of schizophrenia, bipolar, that kind of thing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we had a group of people that we knew really well. And so we kind of knew when they came in again, exactly how we could kind of not manage them exactly, but how we should be. I mean,
a lot of these illnesses like psychosis, schizophrenia, when people are in manic states, they're quite hidden from society. Unless you know someone or you're someone that's affected by it, I don't think people often have a clear understanding. They only have an understanding based on a distorted media portrayal or something they see in the news. What do you think people often misunderstand or misconceive about these kinds of mental health conditions?
Most things, to be honest. I mean, I think, first of all, people seem to see it as a sliding scale. So you get people going, I'm quite bipolar, I am. Do you know what I mean? And not understanding that actually there's a discrete kind of illness that people have. They just think it's and the same goes for a lot of other conditions, because I think people don't understand depression, clinical, diagnosed depression. I know for a long time, I think it's better than it was, but I think people always thought schizophrenia was, a sort of dual personality.
Yeah, I think lots of people still think that.
Do you? That's depressing, isn't it, really? But I think it's hard to explain to a sort of,
to a layperson.
Yes, absolutely. To someone that's got no kind of experience at all. I mean, I do try every time I hear someone, sort of talking about it in that way. But it's very hard to know because I think everything's really changed a lot these days. And we're far more accepting towards like mental health problems. We keep calling them something different. And I think people haven't caught up with it. I mean, I hear people saying, I've got mental health. Well, do you know what I mean? It's like, well, actually, I think what you're saying is you've got poor mental health, or you're mentally ill.
Yeah.
But people feel bad because no one knows what they can say.
That is a problem.
Anymore, because it's a sensitive area.
Do you see that? Do you feel that people are more worried about being offensive than in the past?
Yes, I think they are. I think, I mean, nobody kind of wants to upset anybody. But, I do think in a lot of ways that our society is quite fractured. I mean, like it always has been, in the way that the younger generation, comes up with lots of new ideas. And, that, for example, in the whole area of mental health, younger people are saying, it shouldn't be so stigmatized. And that's all absolutely true. But to some extent, it does need to have some boundaries. There do need to be some boundaries. And I think there's a kind of, things are changing at the moment. And no one's kind of quite sure where to go or how to manage it all. And we're in a crisis, particularly with CAMHS.
Yes.
They just seem not to have any staff, and people are waiting years for an appointment, and that it just can't be like that. If you're a teenager and you're waiting 3 years for an appointment, your life in those times is going to have, so drastically changed. It kind of almost doesn't seem worth bothering.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
I feel like there are a few problems running in parallel. I think there's a lot less stigma being applied to more common mental health difficulties like depression and anxiety.
Yeah.
I think there's still a huge ignorance about more severe mental health problems like schizophrenia and bipolar. At the same time, I see the younger generation fetishizing mental health, and almost having depression or having anxiety is almost giving you some kind of prestige, or it's a marker somehow that your life is interesting.
I agree.
And what you pointed out, which is that we're all becoming very atomized. There seems to be, what a lot of people are talking about is a disintegration of shared experience. We all live in our micro realities now because there's so many media outlets, so many channels you could follow, so many platforms. Everyone is living in their own little world, and we can't even agree on a common landscape before we start to tackle a problem.
You need to have your own show on the radio.
Well, I mean, I guess that's kind of what this is.
Yes, no, absolutely. But, I think there are some podcasts that are so fascinating that they shouldn't just be restricted to people that like listening to that person on that podcast, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's quite terrifying, and I'm wondering whether it will change. Have we been in this situation before? I don't know. Do you think it's something that will come in waves and will settle down, or do you think we're just on a trajectory?
With the whole mental health issue. Well, if I look back at how things were when I was, a nurse, and it is quite a long time ago, but also it's not really that long ago at all. And when you think of those huge sort of psychiatric hospitals in the middle of nowhere that look like a horror film set, and people have been in there for years. And, I went to a few of those because one of our jobs was to deliver people that come to us sort of to their area hospital. And then I think they made a mistake because they then said, well, let's put people out in the community. And to me, there wasn't much of a community. Community meant, and this is a cliche, I know, but I'm just being extreme for the sake of making the point. But community meant on the 22nd floor of a tower block, with people around them that they didn't know. And what community is that, and what support is that? And obviously, the ideal was that you have a community mental health team that supports you. But they're not flexible. So you go, I'm having a crisis on a Sunday morning at 3:00 in the morning. Oh, they're not open till 9. Do you know, on Monday? Do you know what I mean? And that's why, to me, the emergency clinic, expensive as it probably was, I didn't really investigate that side. I think a service that responds 24 hours a day. I mean, people with mental health problems, they don't keep to a timetable. Oh, I can't have a breakdown until Tuesday. Oh, my therapist's on holiday. Do you know what I mean? It's just, I think, because responding on the hour and being available all the time is more expensive, it's disappeared. And I'd like to get my hands on it, but I mean, I don't know. It's politics. It's this it's the government, isn't it? Sort of making choices about what we spend our money on. I'm a bit of an ambulance chaser, literally, because I watch a lot of those shows, like Ambulance, and because I just think they're so interesting, and from a mental health point of view, they are coming along behind everyone else. And so many people they go and see, the major issue is some sort of mental health problem with drink or with psychosis or anxiety. And there literally isn't anybody else, because they're isolated people who live in the most appalling conditions. No one knows them or gives a toss about them. And these lovely people, go in, and they're wonderful because they'll spend 2-3 hours there. But then the problem with that is someone else is being told, "Oh dear, you're having a heart attack. We can't come until Wednesday." You know, I mean, I don't know. Is it just
Absolutely.
money? I don't know.
I don't know.
No.
I think I have to say, I think working in psychiatry is an absolute privilege, and you really do see the world in a different way. And I'm curious to know what kind of life lessons you learned from when you worked in psychiatry.
Oh, crikey. What sort of life lessons did I learn? Well, I think one thing I learned is that actually, you know, you get on much better in life if you're a decent person who's honest with people and you're kind, quite honestly.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
you might think that sounds a bit dull, but yeah. And, you know, the thing that people do with me, which I find quite interesting, they think I'm actually like how I am on stage, you know, and that I do just want to get hold of a shotgun and go blasting men willy-nilly. But it was like I was saying earlier, I deliberately exaggerated everything. And that's what people kind of in a way want you to do. And then I'd kind of have people going to me, "Oh, you hate men, don't you?" And I used to feel like saying, that's one of the most simplistic questions that you can ever ask anyone. No, of course I don't. But that's comedy. Do you not? You know. Anyway, there we go. So I would say that was the big life lesson. And also, whatever happens, if you're under some sort of threat, do your best to look as if you're calm. And then that works for comedy as well as being you know, a nurse under some sort of threat, because when you panic, people have a sense of, you know, of you're falling apart. And comedy audiences, they don't want to stroke you and help you get back on track. They want to destroy you if they see you faltering a bit. And I think in a situation where you're under threat, you know that person feels out of control. So if you start to be out of control as well, that just frightens them even more, and it makes them behave more, you know, extremely, if you like.
Yeah, because I guess when you're on stage, you're the alpha in the room. You're the de facto leader in that moment in time. So they're looking for you. They're looking to you for signs of emotional stability. Like, does the alpha have charge? Are they in charge? Are they okay? And then if they're not okay, maybe we need a new alpha.
Well, I know it's true. And I mean, that was one of the big things I learned early on in comedy is I'd get the most horrendous sort of abuse from guys in the audience. And I would just look like I didn't give a shit, just like look at them like that, you know. And they get tired of it, and it would sort of enrage them a bit as well. And I would quite like that. But it does work. But it's a hard-earned lesson. I ran off once crying. You know, I mean, I didn't achieve it overnight. It kind of took quite a lot of practice. But I just think don't show any weakness. It's kind of quite a male thing in a way, that is, isn't it? I wouldn't do it everywhere in my life, but certainly in comedy, it's very helpful.
And did you feel that ability to not show weakness, was it still very much like an outside persona, or was it something you were able to sort of integrate into your own personality?
Well, I always think if you are something enough and you want to be it enough and you pretend to be it enough, you can eventually become it. So, yes, I think it really did. Pretending to not be perturbed by things actually helped me. Yeah, it really
Eventually
did.
You're not perturbed.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. What's it like to be on stage when you're absolutely killing?
When you're killing? Glorious. I mean, it's lovely because I think comedy is also about people's identification with you, so that some of the ideas you express, I mean, you know I express extreme ideas, but certainly there's nothing better than a massive room full of like men and women laughing together, and, you know, but the women laughing more.
Laughing at the expense of the men, hopefully.
Well, yeah, because it's for so many years it was like the other way around, you know. So yeah, I mean, it's an amazing feeling, and I hear people saying, "Oh, I just couldn't come down after that show, and I was on cloud nine for hours." I never felt like that afterwards. I just thought that was great, and now I'm going home. But at the time, you kind of feel you've almost been sprinkled with magical comedy dust, because anything you say, whether it's off the cuff or not, they just roar with laughter at, And that doesn't happen very often, that it's that brilliant, but...
And you get into a kind of zone, and I often feel when I'm watching comedians, it gets to a point where it's not so much about what they say, but the way they say it conveys such confidence and congruence in what they're saying that you're in for the ride.
Yeah.
And the laughter the laughter almost spills out of you.
Yeah. It's so interesting, because I always thought that there's a range of comedians. There's the people that write absolutely brilliant material, but they can't deliver it. And then there's the people whose material's terrible, but they have a very charismatic personality. So they could say something that another comic would try and it would just die, And that's very common. And then you've got the people who are charismatic and their material's brilliant and they just fly,
They're the Michael Jordans.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you were developing your stand-up, were you writing a lot of stuff down? Because obviously you've since gone on to write a lot of things, a lot of shows. Or were you more working out things on stage?
No, I'm a writer down, and then I sort of learn it. And a lot of my jokes are like a bit wordy, and they very much depend on the order that I put something in for it to work. So I kind of find that quite hard. And these days, my memory is like so disintegrating that I put like notes on the speakers when I'm on stage with my whole set. And I do feel slightly ashamed of that. And I said to a theatre guy recently, because I went on a little tour, I said, I feel terrible that I do this because I kind of feel like it's cheating. And he said, everybody does it. And I was like really pleasantly surprised, because I thought it was just me because I was old, so.
And presumably you're writing down reminders rather than a whole.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, not verbatim. Obviously, I'd have to have about 20 speakers. But actually, I hear that some people do, that the bigger stars have an auto cue which rolls at the back and does the whole thing word for word. So I'm not telling you who they are on this, though.
Okay, fine. All right.
I'll tell you after.
Oh, awesome. What do you find makes a joke work? Or what's the difference between a joke that succeeds and a joke that fails?
I think there's so many different ways a joke succeeds. One of them is shocking people, where the punchline is just like makes people gasp and then they laugh. One thing I think lots of comics do is they're really delighted when something weird happens to them, because they can write a routine around it.
Like Chris Rock.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, sometimes just saying something that's happened to you is funny, because I've got an Apple Watch. I've got no idea what most of the features are, but it takes all this data from you, so it knows what my age is. And it's hilarious, because when I was on tour, Andy, who I've toured with for 20 years, he drove, and his car seats are very low, and I kind of tripped once when I was getting in the car and sort of landed a bit weirdly, and a message came up on my watch that said, "You appear to have had a very heavy fall." And I just tell that to the audience and they laugh, So
sometimes life gives you the material.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just about judging things like that. Do you think that will get a laugh? And you can't always be, absolutely sure it will. So you just have to try it.
Do you find it's important for a comedian to very much be engaging with life off stage to get those interesting experiences, to in order to develop material that really says something interesting.
Do you mean engaging with their life or engaging with political life and
not necessarily
culture?
Politics or culture, though obviously a lot of comedians do, but just engaging with their life on some level. Because I think I heard on another podcast that a lot of comedians in the 80s were traveling around a lot, and their whole life became stand-up, and they didn't really have a life of their own, and you saw a degradation of their material as a result.
Because they didn't really have anything to talk about.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think so. But I think, that there's a real continuum now of how much people reveal of their real lives on social media. I've seen some people like literally like having a miscarriage and filming their emotional reaction to it, which I personally find overwhelming and a bit weird.
You see it on Twitter a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like someone's Twitter bio will be like the worst thing that happened to them.
Yeah.
It's like part of our identity now is bad things that happen to us.
I know. A very big part, I think. I mean, I've also noticed, there's a lot of Edinburgh shows this year are about tragedy in people's lives, losing a relative, having mental health problems, an hour-long show about something really terrible that happened to somebody. And that's kind of very different, really. Because I think if you look at comedy very early on in, say, the 40s, 50s, the 60s, it was pretty much one-liners. So, like, man goes into a pub, or... what do you call or something with it? But and over the years that's changed, and certainly when I started comedy in the 80s, people were starting to talk a bit more about themselves, but they were still doing what were kind of identifiable jokes. Yes. But these days, in some ways, comedy people don't even feel they need to do jokes all the time. They can just talk about it's like I was saying earlier, just things that happen in your life can be funny, and so someone will talk about their mother dying and some, weird thing that the nurse said that was inappropriate, or and do it and sort of almost like a diary with kind of built-in jokes that actually happened in it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and my impression is that comedy in the past was a lot lighter and much more of a break from whatever your life was. And I kind of think that's because life was harder and you needed a break. And now I feel like life in some ways is harder, but in many ways is obviously a lot easier. And there's this mirror image effect has happened where our comedy has become super dark, almost as if to compensate with the lack of friction in our lives.
Well, if you think, wars and things earlier, and people were much kind of harder in a way. I mean, that cliche of stiff upper lip and all that sort of thing, that you hold it all in and you kind of soldier on. I think we've moved away from that. And I think the perfect point is in the middle somewhere, maybe. Who knows? I mean, who am I to say? But yeah, I agree with you, really. People almost making things darker for themselves, And
of course, one of the cool things about comedy is you can confront darkness and make it into something that transcends it on some level. What's the theme of your show at the moment? What kind of ideas are you grappling with?
Well, if I'm perfectly honest with you, I'm 66 now. I'm a bit bored with it all.
Okay.
I can't help it because I've been doing it for so long. I've had an awful few years. Bereavement wise, I've lost.
I'm sorry to hear that. My
parents, both my brothers, 2 out of my 3 best friends, all in the last 6 or 7 years.
Oh wow!
And so I'm kind of sort of taking a back seat with it. So I suppose when I did this tour. I'm a very gobby person, and I say inappropriate things, and they arrive out of my mouth before I've had a chance to stop them. So I get into quite a lot of trouble with the tabloids.
Yeah, and everything is taken very, very literally. Do you see? There's a lot of comedians talk about wokeism as an issue. Obviously, wokeism is more associated with the left than the right. Do you see it as an issue, one that's impacting free speech or artistic expression or anything like that?
Well, I think the problem, it reminds me of the 1980s where there was something called political correctness, which is where certain words in certain left-wing councils were being, questioned. And so you'd have things like people say, oh, you can't say blackboard anymore.
Right.
Like, blackboard kids would have in school because it's racist. I think to some extent it's similar to that in a way, that there's a kind of group of people that have decided on a code, but they haven't checked with everyone else. And so first of all, you don't know what the code is. And secondly, if you break the code, you don't know until someone's told you that knows what the code is. And I think it makes things very difficult, because I think, I feel things are quite fractured in this country at the moment in terms of people's attitudes. And my issue has always been, don't engage with someone who's on such a great distance away from you in terms of the spectrum of what you're discussing. Just try and wait until people are a little bit more reasonable, and people are prepared to meet in the middle. And there are people on every front with every issue that will meet in the middle, but their voices are reasonable and quiet.
And they don't get promoted online.
And at either end, loudness wins the day at the moment in terms of press and, and being heard, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I'm curious about is what makes British humour British?
I think it's quite complex, because I think, the British, because of our history, we were horrible, and we went everywhere, and we created misery and horror and violence, and certain people in this country are proud of the empire, even now, and other people think it's absolutely shameful.
Could it be both? Could there be things that you could be proud of and ashamed of at the same time?
Yeah, you've caught me out at my own game there, because, there are, I'm again sort of referring to the extremes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, to some extent you can meld them together and you can be proud of bits of it, maybe. But again, it's that thing of, let's just move to the edges and we'll shout and you'll shout. And
I can say that because I come from an ex-British colony.
Oh, where do you come from?
From Malta.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Oh, I've been to Malta.
Yeah. We became independent in 1960. But I think we got some of the best that the empire had to offer. There's some disagreement, but I think in the grand scheme of things, we got a lot of the good stuff and very little of the bad stuff. So I think there is this duality even to the history of the empire. Depending on where it was and the particular time.
Absolutely. It's a difficult one. I mean, that there's a guy who I saw very fleetingly the other day on a news program who's trying to get reparation, in terms of like trillions for all the damage that was done. He's the Prime Minister of an African country, and I can't remember which one now. He's talking about his own country, but basically he kind of means every country that was included, as far as particularly Africa.
Yeah.
And, in some way, some people go, oh, well, that's absolutely ridiculous. And then other people go, no, this suffering is... But it is all to do with the fact that our people that were related to you, who were born 200 years ago, how responsible are you for their actions?
It's a question, how responsible should a person feel even about the acts of their immediate father?
Absolutely.
Let alone an ancestor from 200
years ago. I'm never held responsible for the acts of my father.
There you go.
They weren't that bad, I'm exaggerating. But yes, absolutely. So that's just your parents. So if you think... going back that far, it's quite a difficult case to make in some ways, isn't it?
Especially since human history is just dominated by stories of oppression and just terrible thing after terrible thing, and it feels like almost.
I mean, I think in this country, like we're kind of half and half. I think half, roughly, British people feel guilty for what we did, you know. And in terms of the more local you go, so like the Highland clearances and the potato famine in Ireland and Wales, invading Wales, and actually, I sense like in a minor, you know, it might be bigger than minor, but part of those populations that they really, really hate English people, you know, and I can kind of understand that, but you know, we have sort of got to get on a bit. So it's a difficult one, really. I mean, I remember once sitting in a pub in Swansea in Wales, watching England play Germany in the football, and I was the only person in the pub supporting England because all the Welsh were like, come on, you know, and I kind of understand that, but it's not something that English people really know or experience.
They don't understand it.
Because, don't understand it at all. So I'd say there's a difference between like English sense of humour, bit of guilt for a lot of people, whereas you know, I've done terrible things in Scotland before, sort of just deliberately ramped up the when they've started on me, I've done it. I don't deliberately do it on purpose, but if someone starts on me,
you know how to defend yourself.
I'll bring it up a notch or two and then just really create trouble.
Yeah, I mean, I think what everyone's trying to avoid, like people who feel really guilty about the past as far as their society goes, or people who feel excessively proud of their past as far as their society goes, they're both trying to avoid something. And I think what they're trying to avoid is that they, as individuals, are capable of doing immensely bad things and immensely good things. And the problem with the good things, the possibility of doing good things, is there's a huge sense of responsibility. And the problem of that we are capable of doing bad things also imposes a huge sense of responsibility. And I think we're trying to escape from that by projecting the possibility of badness onto someone else, or saying anyone that's associated with me, they're great. They're not just great, they were like the greatest ever. And it's just a waste of time, because we need to be thinking about ourselves, what we can control, and our future. How are we supposed to live our lives in our particular predicament, in our particular context? And all this discussion about who's to blame from 200 years ago seems like a huge waste of mental bandwidth.
Yeah. We're meant to be, you know, sort of getting better. But I think a lot of younger women's lives are getting worse because of the way social media has kind of majored on porn, OnlyFans, all that sort of thing. I think women's lives are kind of a bit of a misery now, you know, sometimes. And I always thought the 60s and 70s are worse, but I don't know if they are for young women because of how easily you can target people these days.
And the internet encourages you to commodify yourself. And in the case of women, it encourages them to commodify their sexuality.
Yeah. I know, and
I think it's also incredibly confusing as well, because we're at a time where we're told that it's so different to 50 years ago for women, but at the same time we do have the OnlyFans. And as a woman who isn't that young, I'm 29, I'm confused to know how I should feel, and whether I should feel proud or resentful. And yes, I think this is the whole thing of the extremes, and you can be somewhere in the middle, but it's difficult to know how to navigate when currently I feel like there's so many conflicting things going on.
Yeah, I think it's hard to know how to be if you're kind of young, you know, a young woman like you these days. I mean, I love older women because basically they don't give a shit anymore, most of them. So they just say what they want, you know, and actually they are quite scary, and that's a good thing too. But I think as younger women, you're juggling two sort of weird, conflicting things, you know, because you want to kind of meet guys and you want to be attractive to them. But on the other hand, you want to retain, you know, the ability to say no and your independence and to do what you want. I mean, not at the expense of everything else, because I think compromise has gone out the window a bit these days as well. But, you know, you want to have some kind of agency to manage your life. And I think there's, you know, because we're kind of you know, the sort of, you know, a bit of a global village now, there are competing cultures with very different attitudes towards women. And so it's kind of hard to know where to go with that, because you want to respect people's cultures, but you don't respect the behaviour that's meted out to women sometimes.
Absolutely.
So it's hard.
Yeah, it's incredibly confusing. And I also think in this current day and age, you can learn so much about so many things. Information is so accessible, but you can't know everything about anything. And if you're in a situation where you don't understand a particular topic that someone's talking to you about, I think people expect you to know everything that they know everything about. And if you're caught in a debate and you don't know everything, then you're massively belittled. And I find that, I don't know if this is just my life experience, but particularly as a woman, I feel massively belittled if I don't know everything about someone's particular opinion. And I find it hard for people to just accept that maybe we don't know everything, but that doesn't mean that we're not on the same level as other people.
Yeah, I think women still, like, if you look at the way that women suffer in Parliament, for example, the amount of abuse that they get, and I think that's a very particular type of abuse. It's like that men are threatened by women having power.
I think
and political power is a particular type of power, I think. Do you not think?
I completely agree. I think people are. Well, everyone is intimidated by other people's power as humans. I think that's a natural instinct. And I think, I don't want to stereotype, but particularly men do feel more intimidated by power against other men as well as other women. I think that's a very real thing. I certainly do feel that.
It's worth pointing out that men are intimidated by women, period. Even a woman that doesn't have power, because the beauty, the femininity, sexuality of women essentially represents an ideal that men have to, on some level, live up to. This is how our race evolved. Like, women chose the best men to mate with, and that caused men to step up and become better, and then the whole species became better. This is how our species evolved. So I think women are intimidating to men, and then I think women with power are especially intimidating to men, especially if they're insecure, and men who chase power are often insecure.
Yeah, and I also think the major issue with that is that men have the physical power to override the power in women that they feel frightened of. So that's a bit of a weird balance, isn't it, really? And it's kind of scary if you're a woman.
Yeah, definitely.
It would be scary in a way if you're a man as well, but...
The problem men are facing now is they feel very disconnected, and they feel like any attempt to improve themselves and become more assertive to find their life's purpose is seen as now toxically masculine. A lot of
I agree.
That is a problem.
I agree, and it's a very difficult path to tread, isn't it?
It's like it's always men versus women versus how do men and women complement each other and how should they build lives together, because that's, at the end of the day, how we function as a society. Is, I think the family is very important.
I do, but I mean, you know, if you think it wasn't that long ago that you had the husband who would go to work and come home and everything would be done for him. I mean, I know it's quite a long time ago, but like these days, how do you juggle the problem of both halves of a couple working, bringing up children, unless they've got loads of money? You can't.
It's a huge problem.
It's a massive problem.
And how are like households chores divided? How is everything split and negotiated?
Yeah, and I mean, I go on women's websites, and women find child rearing boring. They just do, especially when kids are little, you know, because your whole world is centered around them, and they're really annoying. They won't do what you say, and they'll try and walk off a cliff or pour bleach over themselves, you know. So you're you're specialing them 24 hours a day. And there's nothing wrong, I don't think, with saying that. But I think women feel very guilty about it, you know, because it's meant to be this rosy kind of, me cuddling my rosy cheeked child and we're also happy together, blah, blah, blah. And actually the grind of it can be boring. And that's why men don't want to do it as well.
Well, Jo, we've talked about it all. Thank you so much for spending some time with us, and we'd be happy to have you back on the programme at some point in the future.
Pleasure. Thanks so much. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening this week. If you've got any feedback, as always, do get in touch. If you enjoyed the episode, why not give us a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, because it really helps other people to find us. If you want to get in touch, you can find us on Instagram or Twitter, or you can drop us an email. And if you value the show more generally, why not buy us a coffee? Thanks so much.